Hello, my name is a name that still feels new, like a dress I'm still getting used to wearing. But it fits me better than anything I ever owned before. And if you're watching this, you're probably curious about the journey that led me to this name, to this voice, to this life. You might be on your own path, or you might know someone who is, or maybe you just stumbled upon this video and are curious. Wherever you are, welcome. This is my story. I want to start not at the beginning, but at a specific moment. A moment that feels like the end of a very long, very quiet chapter. Picture a man. He's 26 years old. He has a good job in IT, a steady income, a small but nice apartment. He has a wonderful, brilliant, supportive girlfriend named Chloe. He's the guy his friends call when something breaks in their house. He's the reliable one, the quiet one, the one who always has a logical solution for a problem. From the outside, his life is a perfectly constructed puzzle. Every piece fits. Education, career, relationship. Check, check, and check. But inside that puzzle felt like a cage. The pieces were wrong. They were the wrong shape, the wrong color. The picture on the box was someone else's life. I was living in a state of low-grade constant dissonance. It's like when you're listening to music and one instrument is just slightly out of tune. Most people might not notice at first, but to the person playing it, it's all you can hear. It grates on you. It wears you down. For me, that out-of-tune instrument was my gender identity. It wasn't a screaming, dramatic feeling. There was no moment in my childhood where I declared, "I'm a girl," and my parents laughed it off.
It was subtler than that.
It was a persistent, quiet ache. I remember being very young, maybe 6 or 7. My mother was getting ready for a party. I was in her room, and the air was thick with the smell of her perfume, a powdery floral scent. She was in her slip, sitting at her vanity, putting on makeup, a ritual of brushes and creams and colors that I found utterly captivating. I remember watching her apply lipstick, that slow, careful glide of color. She turned to me and smiled. "What do you think?" she asked. I didn't say anything. I was mute with a feeling I couldn't name. It wasn't just admiration. It was a deep, terrible sense of longing. I wanted to be in that slip. I wanted to be the one at the vanity. I wanted to feel that brush on my face and see a different person in the mirror. But I knew with a child's sharp instinct that this was a forbidden thought. I knew I was a boy. I was supposed to like trucks and building things and being dirty. I was supposed to be like my dad, who is a good man, a strong man, but a man of few words and practical actions. He wasn't interested in perfumes or vanity tables. He was interested in engines and tools. So I buried that feeling. I buried it deep down under layers of acceptable boyhood. I played with the trucks. I built the things. I learned to be the practical, quiet son. And I was good at it. I was so good at it that I even convinced myself for a long time that the feeling wasn't there. In school, I was a ghost. I wasn't bullied, but I was largely invisible. I wasn't athletic. I wasn't one of the popular kids. I was the smart kid who got good grades, the one teachers liked. My friends were mostly other quiet kids, the ones who were into books and video games. I remember once at a middle school sleepover, all the boys were talking about girls they thought were cute, comparing notes, being awkward. I listened, I nodded, I laughed at the right times, but I felt like an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. Their maleness felt like a costume I was wearing, and it was always slipping, always feeling uncomfortable. I knew I was supposed to feel one way, but I just felt detached. High school was the same story, just on a larger, more dangerous stage. I dated. I did the things I was supposed to do. I had girlfriends, good girls, kind girls, but the relationships felt like another performance. I was playing a role, the boyfriend role. I was attentive and sweet, but there was always a wall. They could never get close to the real me, because I wasn't even sure who that was. I just knew the person I was pretending to be wasn't me. My father was a product of his generation, a good man but emotionally unavailable. He showed affection through action, not words. He fixed my car. He taught me how to change a tire. He was proud of me for being responsible and for getting a good, stable job. His love was conditional on me being a certain kind of man. And that's what I strived to be. When I met Chloe, I felt like I had hit the jackpot. She was different. She was fiery and intelligent and had this unbelievable capacity for empathy. She wasn't just a girlfriend. She was a partner. She saw through a lot of my walls. She'd call me out when I'd be evasive, when I'd deflect with humor. She made me feel seen. And in that feeling of being seen, I thought I'd finally be okay. I thought having her love would be the piece that completed the puzzle. I thought it would silence the out-of-tune music, but it didn't. It got louder. Being with Chloe was so wonderful and so intimate that it paradoxically made the dissonance I felt about my own body and identity even more pronounced. When we were together, truly together, I was so acutely aware of what I was and what I wasn't. I was aware of the awkward shape of my body, of the heavy, blunt maleness of it. I was envious of her softness, her scent, the clothes she wore. I'd watch her get ready for a night out, and that same feeling I had as a 6-year-old would wash over me. The longing, the ache. Our intimacy was complicated. We had a physical relationship, but there was often a part of me that was just going through the motions. It felt good in a physical way, but it was never the deep, soulful connection I desperately craved. I was always performing, always trying to be the man I thought she wanted. We'd be in bed, and she'd trace patterns on my chest, and I would just feel hollow. It felt like a violation in a way, not because of anything she did, but because she was touching the shell, the mask, and I wanted her to be touching the real me that was trapped inside. I wanted her to touch the girl, but she was touching the man. And I didn't know how to tell her that that man was just a suit I was wearing. Chloe, being Chloe, sensed something was wrong. She'd ask, "Are you okay? You seem sad. You seem far away." And I'd say, "I'm fine. Just tired. Just work stuff." And I'd retreat further into my shell. That's how it was for years. A quiet, comfortable ache, a predictable script, the beautiful boyfriend, the reliable employee, the low-maintenance son. I was the poster child for quiet desperation. I remember standing in the shower one night about a year before everything changed. The water was hot, scalding, and I was just standing there staring at my hands. They were big hands, capable hands, my father's hands. And I suddenly felt this overwhelming desire to just not be in this body anymore. I wanted out. I wanted to escape.
I didn't want to be dead.
I just wanted to be someone else. Anyone else. I leaned my head against the cool tile, and I just cried. It was a silent, stifled cry, tears mixing with the shower water. And that was my life. A private secret world of pain that I was too ashamed and too scared to share with anyone. The unraveling started one Saturday afternoon. Chloe and I were at her apartment. She was having some of her friends over for what she called a self-care Saturday. I was the supportive boyfriend, which meant I was in charge of making sure there was enough wine and that the takeout order was correct. Her friends, Maya, Sarah, and Jess, were already in full swing. The apartment smelled like face masks and incense. They were in the living room, all cross-legged on the floor or draped on the sofa, painting their nails and doing makeovers. I was in the kitchen pretending to be busy with the wine opener, but I was watching them. I was transfixed. It was a scene of pure, unadulterated joy. The way they were laughing, the way they were so casually affectionate with each other. "Oh, that shade is perfect on you." "No, Sarah, you have to use a base coat or it'll chip." "Love me to your eyes, Jess. I'm way better at the smoky look than you are." It was a world I was a spectator to, but one I longed to be a part of. I desperately wanted to be on that floor with them, to be one of the girls. It wasn't a sexual thing. It wasn't a perversion. It was a deep, deep feeling of home. This is where I belong, I thought to myself. This is the tribe I should have been born into. Chloe must have seen the look on my face. She came into the kitchen, a streak of green mask on her cheek, and nudged me. "Hey, you okay? You have that 1,000-yard stare thing happening again." I snapped out of it. "Yeah, sorry. Just zoned out." She looked at me, then looked out to her friends, then back at me. A curious smile played on her lips. She didn't say anything, but I could see a little gear turning in her head. She always had a way of looking at me that made me feel completely exposed, like she could see right through me into the secret thoughts I was trying so hard to hide. Later that evening, after her friends had left and we were cleaning up, I was in a weird mood, a little melancholy, a little quiet. Chloe came up behind me and wrapped her arms around my waist, resting her chin on my shoulder. She smelled of rose hip and lavender. "You were really watching us earlier," she said softly. I froze. "What do you mean?" "You had this look on your face. It was like, I don't know. It was like you were a kid outside a candy store with no money." I started to say, "It's nothing," but she cut me off. "Don't," she said firmly but kindly. "Don't say it's nothing. We've been together for 3 years. I know when something is up with you. You've been so distant lately. And I'm not talking about the past few weeks. I'm talking about the past few years. There's something you're not telling me. Something big." My heart was pounding. My hands, still holding a sponge, were trembling. This was the moment. This was the door I had kept locked for 26 years, and Chloe was standing there with a key. I was terrified. I had a perfect life, a good job, a beautiful girlfriend. If I opened that door, I risked losing all of it. All of it. I don't even know how to. It's crazy, I stammered. "Try me," she said, turning me around to face her. Her eyes were wide, full of love and concern. "Whatever it is, you can tell me. I love you. I'm not going anywhere." And in that moment, I felt it. The dam was about to break. The cage door was swinging open. The 26 years of silent, stifled pain were rising up in my throat. I couldn't speak for a full minute. I just looked at this incredible, wonderful woman, my partner, my best friend, and all I could think was, I'm about to lose you. But I couldn't keep living a lie anymore. It was killing me. I need to tell you something," I whispered, my voice cracking. "And you're going to think I'm insane. You're going to think I'm disgusting. And if you want to leave, I'll understand." Her face went white. She led me to the sofa. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely sit still. "Just tell me," she pleaded. I took a deep, shuddering breath. The words felt like they were being ripped from my soul. I looked down at my hands, the big, clumsy male hands I hated, and I just started to cry. Not the silent, controlled cry from the shower. This was a full-on heaving sob. All the years of pain just poured out of me in a guttural wail. "I don't feel like a man," I choked out. "I've never felt like a man inside. I'm a woman. I've always been a woman. And I've been hiding it my whole life from everyone, from myself. I'm so scared, Chloe. I'm so tired of pretending." And then I just fell apart. I put my face in my hands and sobbed. The secret was out. The thing I had been most ashamed of in the world was out in the open, sitting there in Chloe's beautifully decorated apartment next to the half-empty bottle of rose and the takeout containers. The world hadn't ended, but in my mind, it had. This was the moment the perfect, stable life I'd constructed would come crashing down. I expected her to scream. I expected her to get up and walk out. I expected her to call me a liar or a freak. I braced myself for the end of my world. Instead, I felt her hand on my back. Gentle, soothing. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey, look at me." I couldn't. I was too ashamed. She said something that made me freeze. She didn't call me by my birth name. She called me by a name I had never told anyone, a name I had only whispered to myself in the dark. I looked up at her, my face a mess of tears and snot. I must have looked pathetic. She was crying, too. Her eyes were shimmering with tears. But she was smiling, a soft, sad, beautiful smile. She said my name again, whispering it. "I've been calling you that in my head for 2 years. I stared at her, utterly bewildered. "What?" She took my hands. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know why, but there's always been something so soft, so gentle, so inherently other about you. You're not like other men, and it's not in a bad way. It's what I love about you. I was at your place once a couple of years ago, and I saw you had a journal. I know I shouldn't have, but I read the first page. The first thing you wrote was, 'I wish I had been born a girl.' I thought it might be a character or a persona you were exploring for some creative project, like a video game. But I started thinking of you that way, and it just fit." I was speechless. Tears were streaming down my face. But for the first time in my life, they weren't tears of shame. They were tears of relief. She knew, or at least she knew something. The one person I was most terrified of losing had known my deepest secret. And she was still here. She was still holding my hand. She was still calling me by the name I'd only ever dared to whisper to myself in the dark. "Why didn't you say anything?" I whispered. "Because it wasn't my story to tell," she said. "You had to tell me when you were ready. I knew you were hurting. I knew there was something huge you were hiding. I was scared it was an addiction or an affair or something. I was scared you were going to tell me you were dying. So when you finally let this out, I'm not going to lie, I'm scared. This is scary. It's big. It's going to be hard. But I'm not leaving. I love you. The you that's inside. The you that is her." She leaned in and hugged me. I held on to her like she was a life raft in a stormy sea. All the walls I had built around myself for my entire life came tumbling down in that hug. I wasn't alone anymore. I had never been more terrified and more relieved in my entire life. It was the first time I was ever truly seen. In the following days, we talked more than we ever had. The floodgates were open. I told her everything. About the feeling as a 6-year-old watching my mother, about the longing, the shame, the years of hiding. I told her about the secret panties I bought and hid in the back of my closet, the times I tried on a little lip gloss or mascara in the bathroom mirror and felt a rush of euphoria followed by a crash of self-loathing. The fact that I'd been watching transformation videos on YouTube for years, living vicariously through the girls who were brave enough to be themselves. She listened to all of it. All of it. She didn't judge me. She was shocked at first, sometimes by the intensity of the pain, sometimes by the sheer weight of the secrets. But she never once looked at me with disgust. "So, what do we do?" she asked me one night. It wasn't a we, as in you and I are a team. It was a we, as in you and I are in this together, and we're going to figure it out. Her question was the catalyst. What do we do? Before that, the idea of transitioning was a fantasy, a what if I only allowed myself to think about in my most private moments. It was a beautiful, painful daydream that I knew could never, ever become reality. But Chloe's question made it real. The first step, she suggested, was for me to just start exploring at home. "Just with me," she said. "No pressure. You don't have to tell anyone else. You don't have to do anything. Just let's see who she is." So we did. The first thing she did was go into her closet and pull out some of her clothes that would fit me. I was taller than her, broader in the shoulders, so a lot of her things were too small. But she found a soft, oversized sweater and a simple black maxi skirt. I took them into the bathroom. I remember staring at them in my hands, the soft fabric of the sweater, the flowy material of the skirt. I was terrified. What if I tried them on, and it felt wrong? What if the fantasy was better than the reality? What if I was making a huge mistake? I took off my jeans and t-shirt, the uniform of the man I was pretending to be. I slipped the skirt on first. It felt incredible. The fabric swishing around my legs was a sensation I can't describe. It was like my body was finally getting a signal it had been waiting its whole life for. Yes, my body said, "This is right." Then I pulled on the sweater. It was big and slouchy and soft. I looked in the mirror. The man was still there. He was in the shape of my jaw, my broad shoulders, the stubble on my chin. But, for the first time, I could see a glimpse of someone else underneath. There was a softness there, a feeling of rightness that overwhelmed me. I started crying again, happy tears. I cried so much. It was like I was making up for all the years I hadn't cried. I opened the bathroom door. Chloe was sitting on the bed, waiting. "Okay," I said, my voice trembling. "I did it." She looked up at me, and I saw her eyes widen. A little smile crept onto her face. "Wow," she whispered. "Hi." I couldn't speak. I just nodded, tears streaming down my face. She came over and wrapped her arms around me. "You look beautiful," she said. "You look right." That night, she taught me to put on lipstick. I was clumsy and I got it all over my teeth, but I couldn't stop smiling. Then she taught me the basics of eye makeup. We spent hours just being silly and experimental. She'd paint my nails, then we'd watch a chick flick, and I'd cry at the romantic parts, not just because I was emotional, but because I was finally allowing myself to feel things without the filter of masculinity. I wasn't watching a movie. I was experiencing it. The next few weeks were a period of intense exploration and discovery. Chloe was my guide. She taught me about skincare, which I never had a clue about. She taught me that there was more to the world than just soap and water. She showed me how to exfoliate, how to moisturize, how to make my face feel soft and cared for. I'd buy cheap face masks at the drugstore, and we'd sit together with green goo on our faces and laugh about it. It was the most intimate and wonderful time of my life. We went shopping, but not to the men's department. We'd go to thrift stores first, where I felt less conspicuous. I would nervously pick through the racks, my heart pounding, terrified that someone would know. But Chloe was right there, holding my hand, showing me what would look good on my body type, what would work with my proportions. She was teaching me not just about clothes, but about my own body. I was learning to see my body not as a prison but as a canvas that I was finally allowed to paint. One day, she was doing my makeup. It was a little more elaborate than usual. She'd gotten some color corrector to hide the shadow of my beard and some foundation that matched my skin tone. She was carefully applying a subtle, smoky eyeshadow. "I want you to see something," she said softly when she was done. She'd curled my hair slightly. She led me to the full-length mirror in the bedroom and stood behind me, her hands on my shoulders. I looked in the mirror. The person looking back at me was different. It wasn't just the makeup. It was the expression in my eyes. There was a light in them that had never been there before. The sadness, the quiet desperation, it was gone. In its place was a little spark of joy. The person in the mirror looked more like me than any other reflection I had ever seen. I saw her. I touched my face, my newly soft, smooth face. "Hi," I whispered to my reflection, tears welling up again. "Hello, me." That was the moment I knew there was no going back. I wasn't just a cross-dresser. I wasn't just exploring a kink or a fantasy. I was a woman. I had always been a woman. The reflection in the mirror was the real me, and I wasn't going to hide her anymore. I turned to Chloe, who was also crying. "I have to do this," I said. "I have to transition. I can't live as a man anymore. It's killing me." Chloe nodded, wiping her eyes. "I know," she said. "I was hoping you'd say that." The next step was to find help, the real, professional kind. Chloe helped me research therapists who specialized in gender identity.
I was so scared to make that phone call.
Calling a therapist meant it was real. It meant I was committing to a process that would change my life irrevocably. But with Chloe sitting beside me, her hand on my knee for moral support, I made the call. My first session with Dr. Evans was terrifying. I was a nervous wreck. I was dressed in my normal man clothes, but I felt so naked and exposed. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if she would believe me. I didn't know if I was trans enough. The imposter syndrome was crushing. I sat down in the plush chair in her office, a box of tissues within arm's reach. I wanted to run, but I sat there sweating while she looked at me with a gentle, professional gaze. "So," she said kindly, "tell me what brings you here." And I just unloaded. I told her everything. The whole story from the 6-year-old at the vanity to the moment in Chloe's apartment to the first time I saw her in the mirror. I told her about the shame, the confusion, the euphoria, the despair. I talked for almost the entire hour, barely pausing to breathe. When I was done, I felt exhausted, but lighter, like I had just purged a huge amount of poison from my soul. Dr. Evans listened carefully, took notes, and then at the end she smiled. "That's quite a story," she said. "And it's a story I've heard many times before in its many different forms. You're not alone, and what you're feeling is not wrong." I felt a huge sense of relief wash over me. We spent the rest of the session talking about the process. She explained what a diagnosis of gender dysphoria meant and what it didn't mean. She talked about the standards of care and the journey that lay ahead. There would be therapy sessions, letters of recommendation, endocrinologists, and hormone replacement therapy, HRT. "Your girlfriend," she said, referencing the one I'd mentioned, "seems to be a great support system for you. That's invaluable." "She's amazing," I said, not even trying to hide my smile. The first few months of therapy were a roller coaster. I felt excited, terrified, euphoric, and depressed, sometimes all within the span of an hour. I talked to Dr. Evans about coming out to my parents, my friends, my colleagues. I was out to Chloe and the therapist. That was the safe cocoon. The outside world was a terrifying place full of judgment and potential rejection. The biggest source of fear, aside from my parents, was my job. I worked for a large, conservative tech firm. I was a team lead. I was respected.
I didn't want to lose that respect.
I didn't want to be the subject of gossip and cruel jokes. But I knew that I couldn't keep going to work as the man. It felt like a betrayal of the real me. Chloe and I talked about it endlessly.
What if they fired me?
What if I couldn't get another job? How would we survive? Every time I voiced a fear, Chloe would counter it with a logical, supportive, and loving point. She was my rock. She'd say, "Okay, worst case scenario, they fire you. And you know what? You're brilliant. You'll get another job. We'll figure it out. You can't stay in a job that makes you feel like you have to hide who you are." She was right. Part 4. The first coming out. The first person I came out to besides Chloe and Dr. Evans was my best friend, Mark. Mark and I had been friends since college. We'd met in a computer science class and bonded over our love of video games and terrible pizza. He was a big, gruff guy, the kind of man's man I always felt I had to pretend to be around. He was loud, opinionated, and fiercely loyal. I was terrified of telling him. What if he rejected me? What if he was disgusted? What if I lost the one best friend I had? I invited him over to my apartment for a beer, the way we'd done 100 times before. Chloe was there. We decided she should be there for support. I was a nervous wreck. I cleaned the apartment obsessively. I was sweating despite the air conditioning. Mark arrived, clapped me on the back like he always did, and popped open a beer. "So, what's up?" he asked, his voice booming. "You sounded weird on the phone." I sat down opposite him. My hands were shaking. Chloe came and sat next to me, took my hand, and squeezed it. "Mark, I need to tell you something," I began. "And I need you to just listen until I'm done." "Okay." He looked at me, his smile fading. "Dude, you're scaring me. What's going on? You're not sick, are you?" "Not sick," I said. "No." I took a deep breath. "I'm transgender, Mark. I'm a woman. I'm going to transition. My name is her." The words hung in the air. Mark stared at me. His face was unreadable. For a full 30 seconds, he just looked at me, his beer frozen halfway to his lips. It was the longest 30 seconds of my life. My heart was pounding so loudly, I was sure he could hear it. Then he put his beer down slowly. He leaned forward, his face softening. "Are you serious?" he asked, his voice quiet, gentle. It was the gentlest I'd ever heard him speak. I nodded. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. He looked at Chloe, then back at me. He let out a long, slow breath. "Wow," he said. "Okay. I'm not going to lie. I don't really get it. I mean, I get what you're saying, but I don't know."
"That's pretty heavy, man."
"I mean, woman. I mean, you know what I mean?" He was confused, but he wasn't angry. He wasn't disgusted.
I started to cry. "I'm so sorry, Mark.
I'm so sorry I lied to you for all these years." Hey, he said, getting up and coming over to me. He pulled me into a rough, manly hug. "Don't apologize, you idiot. You're my best friend. You've always been a little different. I guess this explains a lot, actually." That got a laugh out of me. A wet, snotty laugh. We talked for hours. He asked a million questions. "Does this mean you like guys now?" Was one of them. I had to explain that gender identity and sexual orientation were different, and that I was still attracted to women. This boggled his mind for a few minutes, but he worked through it. He didn't fully understand, and he had a lot to learn, but he accepted me. He promised to try to call me by my new name and use she/her pronouns, though he admitted it would take some practice. He looked at my face, which was still clean-shaven, and said, "You know, if you ever want to grow a beard, I think you'd look good with a beard." And then he laughed. And I laughed, too. It was a joke, a silly, stupid joke that let us both know that our friendship was still the same. He said one thing that stuck with me. "You've always seemed kind of sad," he said a little awkwardly. "Even when you were laughing, I thought you were just a really serious person."
Now I know why.
"I'm glad you're not going to be sad anymore."
It was a huge relief.
I had passed my first real test. The fear of being rejected was intense, and the victory of being accepted was just as huge. My parents, however, were a different story. I put it off for months. It was like a dark cloud hanging over my head. Every time I thought about telling them, my stomach would turn. My father was a traditional, conservative man. My mother, while more gentle, was deeply embedded in her social circle and community. How would they explain to the neighbors that their son was now their daughter? The very thought made me feel physically ill. Chloe and I strategized. We wrote a letter. We practiced the conversation. We decided to do it over the phone so I wouldn't have to face their initial reaction in person. It felt cowardly, but I knew I couldn't do it face to face. I called them on a Sunday afternoon. My hands were so sweaty I could barely hold the phone. Chloe sat beside me, holding my hand, her other hand on my back, rubbing small circles. "Hi, Mom." "Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. My mom's cheerful voice answered. "Hi, sweetie. We were just talking about you. How are you?" "I'm good," I lied. "I have something I need to tell you both." "Is Dad there?" My dad grumbled in the background, and I could hear him pick up the other phone. "Yeah, I'm here. What's going on? You okay?" That was the moment, just like with Mark. The moment of truth. "I need to tell you something that might be hard to hear, but I need you to listen," I began. "I've been struggling with my gender my entire life, and I've come to the conclusion that I'm transgender. I'm a woman. My name is her, and I'm going to transition to live as my authentic self." Silence. A deafening, crushing silence on the other end of the line. Then my mother spoke, her voice strained. "What do you mean, transgender? What are you talking about?" I explained it as best I could. I used the words Dr. Evans had taught me. I talked about gender dysphoria, about how I'd felt this way since I was a child. "I don't understand," my mother said. "But you are such a normal boy. You played with trucks. You had friends. You dated girls." "I was pretending, Mom," I said, my voice breaking. I was so good at pretending, but it was killing me. It was making me so unhappy. "I don't think this is real," my father said abruptly. His voice was cold, hard. "I think you're confused. I think someone has put this idea in your head. That girlfriend of yours, the artsy one." "Dad, no," I said, defending Chloe. "She's been my rock. This is me. This is who I've always been." I could hear my father taking a deep breath. "You're a man," he said flatly. "You were born a man.
You'll always be a man."
"This is a perversion. It's a sickness. I'm not going to support this thing you're doing. I'm not going to have my son be a freak." His words were like a knife through my heart. The one person whose approval I'd always craved, whose love I'd always tried to earn, was rejecting me outright. My mother started to cry. "Why would you do this to us?" she sobbed. "What are we going to tell the neighbors? What are people going to think?" The conversation was a disaster. It lasted maybe 20 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. I tried to reason with them, but they weren't listening. They were too hurt, too angry, too ashamed. We ended the call with my mother sobbing and my father issuing an ultimatum. Get help. Correct this mistake, or lose them forever. I put the phone down and collapsed into a heap of tears. I felt like someone had just told me I was dead to them. The fear I'd had for years had come true. My worst nightmare was happening. My parents, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, had just told me that their love was in fact conditional. Chloe held me for a long time. "It's okay," she whispered. "It's going to be okay. They just need time." They said things in anger and shock. They might come around. But I couldn't see how they ever would. I felt a part of me die in that moment. It was a terrible, crushing loss. But as I lay there in Chloe's arms, I also felt a strange sense of resolve. I had told them the truth. The secret was out. I had survived. The worst-case scenario had happened. And I was still here, still breathing. I wasn't dead. That night, I made a promise to myself and to Chloe. I would not let my father's words define me. I would not let his rejection stop me from becoming who I was meant to be. The pain was immense, but it would not break me. Part 5. The Journey Forward. The months that followed were some of the hardest of my life. I started hormone replacement therapy, and the changes, both physical and emotional, were profound. I felt like I was finally becoming the person I had always been, but the process was slow and often painful. My relationship with my parents remained strained. We spoke occasionally, but the conversations were stilted and painful. They refused to use my new name or pronouns, and every interaction felt like a fresh wound. I learned to accept that they might never fully accept me, and I found strength in the people who did: Chloe, Mark, Dr. Evans, and a growing community of friends who saw me for who I truly was. I came out at work, and while it was terrifying, the response was surprisingly positive. My colleagues were supportive, and my HR department was accommodating. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I no longer had to hide. I started wearing women's clothes full-time, and I finally felt like I was truly living. The first time I walked into a women's restroom, I was terrified. But when I came out, I felt a sense of triumph. I had overcome another fear. The journey was far from over, but I had come so far from the scared, lonely person I used to be. I had found my voice. I had found my identity. I had found myself. And through it all, Chloe was there, holding my hand, reminding me that I was loved. She was my anchor, my rock, my